Okay, we will get started. Thank you everyone for joining. We are excited to discuss with you how Opkey is partnering with our SI partners to solve some challenges that we've seen in the market and drive outcomes that are relevant to you. So the focus today will be what those outcomes are, how we can achieve that, and how we can work with you and partner with you, leveraging Opkey capabilities to achieve that. And so today, when the topic is contract to cloud, but the focus is when we're engaging customers in the RFP sales cycles all the way through the deployment of that first prototype. And what we're focused on is speed to value. How can we deploy that faster? Leverage different capabilities to make it more efficient. That allows you to be more competitive as you go to market. And something else that's important is how do we also help enable you to have delivery excellence and standardization in that delivery, which we know all partners are striving for, and ultimately allow you to deploy a prototype that is a customer can relate to, that is more a real example of how the future state could look. So you're reducing iterations of deployment and getting to that decision making much faster, which we know in the front end of a project is what it's all about, right? Is helping them see the future, getting their adoption and buy-in on here's the way this is going to be done, the recommended transformation, and then starting to test that, prove it out, and lock that down as you move through the implementation. So we'll do a quick introduction. So my name is David Zimmerman. I am our VP of Product and Solutions. So I lead our product strategy and our solution engineering team at Opkey. I have been here a little over a year and a half, and I'm very passionate about what we're doing. I came from over 15 years in consulting, and my focus was Oracle HCM Cloud and how in transformation projects worked for many different SI partners over that time. Aradhana, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. I'm Aradhana. I'm a pre-sales engineer here at Opkey, and I'll be working with David today to walk you through the platform. It's awesome. Very nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Aradhana. And we welcome questions, so please leverage the Q&A window as we get into. We're gonna go through just setting some context first on the challenges and outcomes and objectives. Then we will get into the demonstration, and we'll spend most of our time showing this all to you, so bringing this to life. As you have questions, please use the Q&A window. I will monitor that, answer questions live. If we have some time at the end, which we're going to strive for, we'll even open up and call out some of these Q&A questions and responses live for others to hear if it's helpful for you. So with that, we went through our introductions. How can Opkey help you, right, achieve this outcome of faster deployments, helping customers get return on investment by shortening that life cycle of that implementation, but doing it all without adding risk. I mean, the key here is when you're doing it without automation and AI capabilities, and you're putting it on the backs of the human workers, there's an inherent risk of error, inherent risk of taking shortcuts, and then having challenges with that delivery. So we're going to show you how we're solving that and adding guardrails and helping that delivery excellence, but also gaining some speed to value. We'll get into a demo, and then we'll have a Q&A on the back end. So for those of you who don't know Opkey, we have been in the test automation space for over 10 years. And in the past 4 years, we've been focused on other agents that can help with the implementation, lifecycle, operations, and how you operate once you're live, and how all this can come in to solve all these manual tasks that go into these life cycles to drive that speed to value. We are an Oracle partner. We worked with direct customers, from Fortune 50 all around the world to mid-enterprise, all different industries. And we work with various partners in different capacities, whether it's referral or resell motions, as well as strategic partners where we are equipping our partners with our technology so they can embed it in their methodology. Multiple different ways we work with direct customers and partners, and we have a very close relationship with Oracle. We meet with them regularly, so we want to always complement what they're doing and going as they go to market, and bring value in how we're driving down the cost of these implementations, these operations, so we can help unlock more value for customers. So let's get into why we're here today. So and this is nothing new to those on the phone who are living this day to day. When we think of current implementations and how manual it is, this is really going to tee up the why behind the solutions you're going to see today and how we're helping. So we know you have to go through that process of RFP responses, gathering some discovery information to drive the scope, define the SOW, and plan the project, and ultimately submit pricing for that. That's all very manual. And then there's a handoff from sales to delivery when you then take that input and that understanding of that customer once you've signed them, and then you're doing deeper discovery about every little nuance across these different applications, business processes. How do they used to do it? How do they want to do it? What's the pain? And then bringing in that transformational lens on things they may not know that has worked well in other projects, other engagements, and helping go through that design thinking to come up and formulate the design that's going to be best for them. And that's a very manual process that's very heavy on the front end of the project. And then we get into the configuration. So now we actually have to design the system, do the manual configuration, double check our work, validate, then create deliverables to understand, to really get sign off on what are the requirements, fit gap analysis, what does that configuration look like, and getting alignment with the customer before we get into the first prototype, and then subsequent prototypes or sprints as we're iterating on that design and getting their hands on it. Today, and just I hit on a few of these, but just to emphasize these challenges that I know we're all very well aware of is, asking the same question twice is the cardinal sin in consulting. So we don't want to do that, and that can happen when you hand off from sales to delivery if there are different teams. So making sure that we take all the responses and the knowledge from that upfront pre-sales conversations and feed it in, so we're preventing that from happening. And we'll show you how that works today. Driving more delivery consistency, because delivery can be different by consultant. We try to standardize it with methodologies and the different documentation, but at the end of the day, there is always a risk of inconsistency, and we're having to manage people to drive that consistency. And that leads to risk, and could even have revenue impacts or a potential impact to go live, change orders, and ultimately having the customer be satisfied and referenceable. So manual configuration, we all know it's very slow and time consuming, and it's a grind. So that is a huge challenge. And we're prone to errors on, just doing so much volume. And if we make a human error, that having an implication on the testing cycle and the perception from the customer. Validating this data, that double checking of our work, creating deliverables. There's a lot of deliverables, and it's very manual. And all this attributes to timelines, right? We have to bake all of this in our methodology to execute each of these different steps, and how long it's going to take, how many people we need, and ultimately that drives the cost and how long it's going to take. So when we think of the Opkey advantage and how we're equipping partners to solve these challenges with automation and AI, when we create these SOWs, we're able to, in what you're going to see today called the Design Studio, we're able to ask questions, have AI make recommendations, the human validates that, and we can more quickly and efficiently define that scope. That is important for traceability. So having that all in one platform allows us to have end-to-end traceability from scope all the way through requirements, configuration, testing, and all the way through go live. And automating that and having it in one place. And then streamlining that handoff from sales to the delivery team, again, with the same experience where they can take the inputs from the RFP, from the SOW, from that process, automatically fill out the questions they would ask, which they're going to have some that are similar, to make sure that they don't ask those twice. And then having AI autofill any additional questions based on context. So discussions that have been had with AI note takers, capturing those discussions, any other documents the customer's given us, and then pre-filling that design set. Also bringing in the concept of accelerators. If we have best practice design based on a module, based on an industry, that can also be built into repositories. So you can bring all of this together to speed up how that maps to ultimately the configuration and the design. the architect or the lead can validate that and answer any remaining questions in a chat experience with AI behind it. So that's really driving the discovery and design as we prior to deploying the first prototype, and then finally the deploying of the configuration. So automating that, where we follow a DevOps approach to understand the sequencing of tasks, understand the dependencies across modules, be able to deploy these overnight, and have our agents log in and do the configuration. So you can just streamline that, automate it, and reduce human error. So, I hit on these benefits on the right, but one thing I just want to call out that I didn't touch on is, again, making sure we have guardrails, pre-validations in delivery. So if an architect makes a decision, or maybe they're a more junior architect, you can have not only Oracle best practices, but you can build in best practices for your firm. So that way, as they make design decisions, they're leveraging the knowledge collectively across, what you would deem as being a best practice. Auto-generating deliverables. So whether it be fit gap documents, config workbooks, RICE trackers, RAID logs, we have all that information. We understand the conversations that have been had. Being able to initiate those documents so you can pick them up and go from there speeds up the whole process and streamlines it as well. And then I would just say, when we automate configuration, automating the validation to make sure we have confirmation everything was done properly, and a functional person can easily validate that. And what does this lead to? This leads to faster delivery at a lower cost and without adding risk, which typically you add more, you increase the speed, you reduce the cost, you reduce the resourcing, you're going to add risk inherently. So we're able to do that without adding risk. And ultimately that gives you a competitive advantage. So as you go to market, you're able to bring this more modern, advanced way of delivery, which allows you to be more competitive in your pricing, be able to lift your margins, and ultimately, be able to win a higher percentage of the contracts that you're bidding for. So I know that was that. Hopefully, that set the tone in answering why is Opkey gonna, and how is Opkey gonna help us, and what's the use case, and what is the value. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time here. This is what we're going to demonstrate today, but I just want to introduce. So Design Studio is where we are all the way from SOW through discovery, through design, through deploying the first prototype. This is the studio where we have an orchestration of multiple agents working together to deliver the value we just talked about. And then once you've deployed the first prototype, and now you're just migrating configuration. So maybe you go through KDDs, you make some design decisions coming out of a first, second, third prototype, minor changes to config. You can then move that over from one environment to another, reduce all that manual work, compare environments, even move more advanced things like BPM, approval logic, fast formulas, and all the different things that really go into making sure configuration gets to the next environment as you do mock conversions and build the technical objects. So adding up to time savings, not just on the front end, but all the way through the implementation to help you achieve the goal, right, which is increasing that speed to value. So with that, let's move to a demo and let's see this in action. Aradhana, over to you.
Let me go ahead and start presenting. Give me 1 second.
And Aradhana, just for the sake of time, I'll kind of jump in and pass it to you as we go, as we kind of go through here. We have 30 minutes. Want to leave some time on the back end for Q&A, but also want to make sure we cover this. And there's a lot to cover. So today we're going to go pretty high level. And what I would just welcome is, if this interests you, if you want to have further discussions, if you want a more personalized demo where we have more time and can answer your direct questions, we'd love to set that up. So at the end, we'll have an email you can reach out to. You can also go to our website, and we want to connect with you. We want to go a bit deeper if that's something that you desire. So right off the bat, I just want to share, this is really important when you understand how our AI strategy and how this works. As an SI partner and leveraging this solution, we have created our own small language model called Argus. That is a domain-specific model trained on all things Oracle Cloud. And that allows it to be very focused in its purpose. We've benchmarked it all to open source LLMs, and it outperforms in the context of what it's trying to do. That is the intelligence layer behind this, and it's Opkey owned. So it's not using open source models. It is our model. As we partner with SIs, The strategy is that we would stand you up in your own private domain with the Opkey platform from a hosting perspective, and we would give you a copy of Argus. So you would have your own version, and it does not connect back to our model. There's no open source models involved. And what that allows you to do is curate your own knowledge repository, or what we call a RAG, where it can retrieve best practices tied to your firm and your intellectual property. But it's all contained in a private domain that is just owned by you. So that's a huge differentiator. We also aren't following a token approach where you're paying for the infrastructure. So it's very predictable pricing, and it's a much more cost-effective, scalable solution. So I know that we could probably talk a lot more about that, but that's really important you understand the differentiation as you think of using this, and the fact that all your IP would be protected because it would be secure in your own environment. We have developed our own RAG, which is a knowledge repository of all things Oracle Cloud, knowledge, implementation guides, user guides, help documents. And we've built this model. And then there's agents that it orchestrates. So you're going to see these agents come in. I'll call them out. But outside of that layer of RAG and intelligence that we've built, that we maintain and we bring updates to you, this is an example of a project agnostic RAG layer. So you could add accelerators, you could add pre-built templates by industry, you could add process maps that you already have curated, but you're putting them in Opkey so you can leverage them to increase that speed to value when you're going through delivery. So it's not just AI, it's leveraging the assets you've built to make sure you can pick those up and leverage best practices very quickly. And then this is where we can do retrospective learning. Here's what we learned we should do, what we shouldn't do. Here's a nuance by industry. So this is where we're building what's unique about your firm into the intelligence of the design studio. So Rhonda, let's go into a project. So we've talked about our intelligence layer that is overarching, building your RAG, which is specific to your firm for all projects. Now we're in the project itself. So within each project, you can add documentation. And these documents can be retrieved and leveraged only in this project, and it's defined by security on access and who can get there. So our model is leveraging all three layers to most efficiently and effectively support you during discovery and design. So Aran has, in this case, uploaded a document. We have an extraction agent, so it goes in, it chunks out the document, it takes the information out, and you would be loading dozens of these. It could be SOWs, RFPs. This could be AI note taking from just conversations that have been had, and it will extract all this information to be referenced as we go through and answer questions. Okay, Rhonda, let's go ahead and kick off a project. So before we do, and Rhonda, while you're going here, if you see on the bottom, it says start from an industry template. This is your repository. So you could have it by industry, by size customer. Some modules allow for more prescriptive best practices than others. But again, if you have all of this now, most SIs have curated a lot of this on spreadsheets and other types of repositories. Now you can select it as a starting point. So if we selected manufacturing, this potentially could fill out 40% of the design based on what we know is the best practice in manufacturing. So that is the opportunity to start there. In this case, we're just going to start from a blank slate, and we're not going to select it. You don't have to. And we'll have our AI go and read the document we loaded to then fill out the responses to questions. So Rhonda, let's go ahead and kick that off. Okay. Yeah, I think we're good. Let's kick it off.
Okay.
So what it's doing now is we have another agent orchestrated by our model that is going and it is referencing that document. And again, in the real world, you'd have dozens of these, and it's mapping those responses to the design. Now, if there are any conflicts, we have a conflict agent that will, in this case, there are none. It would say, hey, there's 5 conflicts because in 3 different meetings, the client changed their mind. So you would resolve those conflicts first, and then it would populate. And so what's happened now, if you look on the left, 50% of the questions have been answered from this document. And the more documents, the more enriched you kind of load into the repository, the more percentage you're going to get output from that process. And then also stacking accelerators, it even moves the needle even more. So on the left, you can see the different task areas and the percentage of completion. On the right, you can see how it maps to metadata. So this is a digital version of your config workbook. We are mapping responses and design decisions to the actual configuration on the right. So Rhonda, let's kind of engage here. Rhonda, would you mind hiding that bar on the bottom?
Oh,
Thank you.
can you see it as well? Let me go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so it is what it's going to do is start asking questions that it could not derive. So now we're filling out. If you notice, we went to 51%. So it's asking the remaining questions. Rhonda, can you just show like the information icon and kind of what's happening here? So you can see how the questions map to the fields on the right. You can see the relationship. We can see what will it accept, what are examples, what's recommended. So if there's LOVs that we have to select from, it's got all of that built in to add those guardrails. And this is where we're pulling Oracle best practices. So it will call out those best practices, but as we enrich it with your best practices, that's where it really becomes unique to your firm and to the way you deliver by industry or whatever vertical that is. So Rhonda, let's go ahead and make a change.
So I'll try to change the application name to something that's not valid.
Got it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hit a validation rule to show you if we input something that is not accepted by Oracle, the design studio is going to call out, hey, this isn't going to be accepted.
Let me just reopen my.
Okay. So what it's done is on the bottom in the chat, it's told us the character limitations. And on the top right, it's also flagged it. So we have an 8-character limitation. And it's important we catch these things early so we make the right design decisions before we deploy automation. Because if we automatically configure this, it will fail on the automated configuration portion. So we're catching these things early. And it's giving some recommendations, like here's some recommendations on what you could name it to fit in that 8 characters. So again, pre-validations are very important. And this is another example of those guardrails. We also can build in logic that, in rule sets. So if let's say you're as a firm, you say, here's what we always want the name to be for this application. And this is an EPM example. You can build that logic in so it doesn't even ask the end user. It could just say, concatenate this with this and always do that. So that can be built in to get some speed as well. Arana, can we make a significant change here and show what that does as well?
So I'm going to change the time period from 12 to 13 periods.
Got it. So since this is a very significant change in EPM, it's telling us before you do this, here's what's going to happen and the implications of that change. And so when Arana accepts it, now it says, because you made this change, that's a fundamental change to the design. Here's 5 new fields that are required that you need to be aware of. So again, it's putting this information in. And what this allows you to do is, again, standardized delivery, be able to equip more junior architects to be able to drive this, but still make sure their delivery is meeting that expectations you have as a firm, and you're preventing issues from making it into the design. Okay. Arana, can you just ask a question too? And then I think we can continue on here. So outside of just answering questions and it mapping and all that, it's dynamic, right? You could ask, information about something within Oracle. Again, as we build your RAG, if there's best practices for an industry, that architect or lead could ask questions here and get information. So you're able to have this chat experience to get the information you need to make those design decisions. And it's a very dynamic, interactive AI experience. Okay. So for the sake of time, we're going to move on. So this is the discovery portion. Now, once we've filled all this out and we're not complete, but let's imagine we completed it. It moves to our design set. So Rhonda, let's go ahead and go there. And this is where we can now view the design and all the different, this is essentially a digital version of your config workbook. Rhonda, if you could expand the panel on the right. So what we can see those are all the fields that were in the other screen. And this is where, you're validating before you configure, and maybe you're doing some back and forth with the client, right? You've answered all the questions. As an architect, you're analyzing this and saying, you know what, this is not what we'd recommend. I want to recommend a change. You can talk to the client, make the change here. So we understand design is not just one and done. There's some iterations. This is where you would do that. But if you see it's flagging, okay, you're missing data. So it's calling out those validations. And before we would deploy, we can do a validation of this entire design set. It could be things about, required fields or character limitations or any of these different factors to make sure when we actually configure the system, it goes in one shot and there's no errors. Miranda, can we show the config workbook, please? So for the sake of time, we're going to just show the workbook portion, but you can easily export the config workbook into the standard DS30 format. So everything that's mapping in to go through the config agent is also viewed in this functional workbook. So any of the tabs associated with that deployment would be exported for sign off. So you're not going to have to fill out workbooks. This is solving that deliverable. One thing we're not showing today is also we have the ability to build the requirement fit gap document. So based on all those documents we extracted from, we have all that context to understand what are the requirements. And then the AI will determine what's a fit or a gap. And then obviously the human needs to validate. There might be some margin of error there. So the human says, you know what, actually, this is a real gap. And then they build on that. So what we're doing is we're generating these documents. So we're saving time on the manual deliverables, and other things that are coming are the RICE tracker, RAID log, and all these things that start as the inception of these documents is coming out of the initial discovery and design. And those will then be automated to speed things up. So now, once we've done validation, we can start the deployment. And now what this is doing is leveraging our config agent. We're going to show you more use cases of config agent to save time and achieve the outcomes we talked about. But this is where we follow a DevOps or CI/CD pipeline type approach to automate the configuration. And so what you'll see here is it automatically sequences the tasks based on dependencies. All that is built in. You don't have to think about that. And every time we configure, which we're leveraging virtual machines, we're leveraging different technology, APIs, loaders, spreadsheet loaders, different mechanisms based on the task and what's available. And if there's nothing available, we use what we call IWA. And so we're configuring that task, and then we're immediately double checking. We're doing a unit test where we validate, did that config load successfully? So instead of it being a technical log, and instead of just saying at the task level, this was loaded, we can actually look into that workbook and see what was configured. So Rhonda, can we show an example of a unit test?
This is what it's going to look like.
So that same output that we had printed off for sign off, we now get that output, and it's going to highlight the rows that were successful in green. And if, let's say, you loaded 100 items or objects, it would, if anything fails, it'll highlight it in red. So immediately you would functionally be able to validate that it loaded successfully and have that as sign off as well, and have that as an audit trail. We can track how long it took. Can you go back to the pipeline, Rhonda? We can, again, for thinking of a CI/CD pipeline, you can add tasks in between. So you could put notifications, you could put in approvals, you can do branching. So you could, get an approval configure, and then once that's approved and configured in a dev environment, you can then branch and configure test in other dev environments. So you can do that as well as build in functional testing and anything else in Opkey in this end-to-end pipeline. So it's very dynamic to meet the needs of that you have in your methodology. Okay. Ron, I think with that, and I know we're kind of, we're moving quickly here. Let me see if there's anything in the Q&A, but let's, before I move over, yeah, I think this might be a good time to jump in here. So, okay, so I'm just going to answer these live. So are we training any new models right now for Argus 2.0? How regularly do you roll out new models? Great question. And the answer is absolutely, we have to, right? I mean, we see how this is happening in the market. So again, it's our own proprietary model. We have a mechanism of how we can train the next more performant model, right? As we go through 2.0. So that is absolutely in the works right now as we move, and it'll continue. So we'll move to a 2.0, 3.0, but that it's just like if you think of Claude and Opus or any of these backend intelligence layers, they just get better, and we can plug the new one in to get more performance, more accuracy, more value. But it's not changing the RAG layer, which the RAG is all the retrievable, knowledge that is around Oracle or the RAG that you develop for yourself. So that's the beautiful thing, is as the model gets better and evolves, and we can, give an SI the latest model, the latest copy, it's just that intelligence layer that sits behind and retrieves from these RAG layers. So we don't have to do any rework, or it's a seamless way of evolving the model. So Will, just wanted to answer that question. And then there's another one on, is Argus trained on my Oracle support documentation or just publicly available information? So we have to be careful there, right? And we are a close partner of Oracle, so we are working closely with them, and they are very interested and want us to leverage all their best practices. So we bear fruit from that relationship, and it's important to us to build that in. But we all know, outside of Oracle best practices, really the secret sauce of any SI is your IP, your knowledge, your experience from project to project, and all the years of experience in a given industry or vertical, as well as lessons learned. So that's where, that is still safe with you at your RAG on your private domain. And that's where this gets even better. But we will keep up with all the public documentation coming from Oracle. But with my Oracle support, if it's something Oracle has put out there as a truth, we are pulling it in. If it's something that is like someone's opinion, or it's on Customer Connect, or if it's not something that's a hard fact, then we're not going to pull it in. So we're being very cautious of what we pull in, but yes, we are pulling in as much documentation as we can that Oracle is putting out there. Okay. Thank you for the questions, and keep them coming as we go. So now we're going to transition to Config Agent, and you saw Config Agent at the tail end of Design Studio. So just to reference where we're at, we streamlined how we engage with customers on the front end. We gather information. We streamlined how we go through discovery and put guardrails on delivery to make it consistent and get that speed to value. We then solve manual deliverables. We make design decisions before deployment. We validate that, and then we deploy it. Now our first prototype has been deployed. And with this speed, we can even better enable maybe converting certain sets of data, so that client can see, wow, this really feels like my future system very early in the project, which then leads to less iterations of design and better buy-in from the customers early on and seeing what the future looks like. Now, when we're just going through the grind of mock conversions and iterating, testing cycles to get sign off, going through sprints or CRPs, whatever you call it, then sit cycles, then UAT, then deployment. So we're just configuring over and over and over again. And there's, maybe some change being put into that, but also we're trying to make sure we configure with quality. So we have good, high quality testing events, really good adoption. Customers aren't concerned or worried because they don't see a lot of issues. And ultimately, then we're having good, confident feelings going into go live. So think of this as all things config management. So out of the gate, right, you can export configuration from an environment. You can import it into the next environment. And Aranda, can we show an export? So let's imagine we're moving from dev 1 to dev 2 for the next prototype. Again, everything comes back to this DS30, because it's not just about moving it, it's about sign off and being able to represent to your architects and your functional people what the actual design is, and then also be able to hand that to a customer as a deliverable. So if you could click on a tab, Aranda, so you can easily export, and this is every metadata field, everything that's in the UI, everything that's on the backend setup, just as SIs are doing today manually. So we can export it out, and then we can import it in. And Aranda, if we could just flash up the pipeline, when we import it in, it's the same pipeline approach that you saw coming out of the Design Studio. It'll auto sequence the tasks. It'll do unit tests. You can build in approvals and branching and all these different things. And it's all audit. You can audit all of this. So there's a use case there. Now, we gave even more controls. And the next use case I'll talk about is what we call Delta export. If you could pull that up, Aranda, just comparing to environments and showing what the difference is and choosing what to migrate. Okay, so this is the compare, right? Okay, so let's go to the selective migration first, or the Delta export, please. Yeah, okay. So what you can do as you're moving environments, we all know there's throwaway configuration, right? So, after prototype 1, we were proving some things out. Don't want to move, junk over to the next environment. We want it to be clean. In the same DS30, what it will do is compare to environments, and you can understand the differences. So in this, the source and the target both have that blue row, and the green row are in the source, but not the target. So what you can do is come in here and say, you know what, in this legal addresses, 10 of these aren't relevant. I'm going to delete them off before I load it in. So this just gives you more control to make decisions on after you export out, cleaning things up before you import it into the next environment. So we're better equipping you to make those decisions as you move configuration. As you're moving environments, another use case is I just want to audit, now we've moved config. Is it one-to-one across these two environments? So we're just catching any issues. So we have a compare feature where you can compare two environments. Another use case is the same environment over 2 points in time. So maybe we had a freeze on all configuration. We told the team pencils down, but we're seeing an issue and we don't know why. You can also compare, last week's export to this week's export. So what changed from last week to this week in this single environment? So a couple different use cases. Rana, can we just show what this looks like? So you could filter, find the discrepancy. We've staged some of these here. Anything blue is in both environments. If it's green or red, it's in one but not the other. And then if it's an amber row, then there's a discrepancy at a field level. Okay, I think we just saw one. So in this case, a date field is different. So again, this could be just to audit, everything's good, everything's one-to-one, or auditing, we expected these changes, or hey, we want to make sure that we're preventing any changes as we're doing a freeze. All of this can help and give you that audit and that control at a project level. Okay, a couple more scenarios, and then we're getting ready to be at the end of our session here. And again, we'd welcome any other questions if you have any. We can move BI reports. We just give more controls outside of catalog files to select data models. So you can move individual reports. So you have more finite control of that, what's approved to go to one environment. Fast formulas. We also move advanced BPM logic from one environment to another. So that's seamless. And again, having more control to migrate selective configuration. So think of this as, okay, Design Studio got us set up on the front end. We've done most of the heavy lifting. We have a really close design to what needs to be done. We had to define some workarounds. We've done some things in the system. We're coming out of our prototype 1, going to 2, and then 3, and then sit. This is how you speed up and save time to move configuration from one environment to another. And all of this comes together to drive that speed to value. So when you add all of this up from Design Studio on the front end, config through each of the different cycles that you're moving through in your methodology, this is where you can see that significant time savings. But at the same time, you're not adding risk because you're doing it with automation. And if anything, you're adding more controls, more audit, more oversight to catch things if they occur, versus it being a black box and something that you're relying on your team to communicate to you. So with that, I don't see any other questions outside of the ones I addressed earlier. If you have any, now's a good time to raise them. But Aradhana, please pass it back to me, and I want to share my screen and just do kind of close this out.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. All right, so we've concluded the demo. As next steps, again, I know I mentioned this at the beginning. If you want to learn more about Opkey, you can scan the QR code. You can go to our website. We have information on on all the different solutions in our platform. We have a lot more than we covered today, and we'll be doing subsequent these Friday demo workshops to share with everyone. So if you're interested in other things, we'd love to hear from you on what those are. We have plans for the coming weeks on different topics, again, aligning to outcomes that relate to the things you're going through and the things you're driving to increase revenue and efficiency. Also, if you do have any direct questions, michaelcarr@opkey.com, that's an email you can reach out to. Please take note of that, screenshot it. And if Michael works with all of our partners, so we can set up demos, we can answer any questions you have. So again, love to hear from you if there's any follow-ups. It could even be just a question coming out of today, so we can engage further. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions. We appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for joining. We'll give you some time back, and I hope everyone has a good Friday and a good weekend.
There is one in the chat, David.
In the chat. Okay.
Yes.
So
it says once the system is built, will it then build your test pack?
Yeah. So the way that works, and we'll have a follow-up session focused on more testing and training. But yes, since it's all is in one platform, that's really the amplified benefit that we get, right? Because as you can see, we understand the design very intimately. We understand every little setup. You can even in that pipeline of configuration build in functional testing. So, I've built a module, I've deployed it, I've gotten approval that it's done. I want to run functional tests to make sure it actually is working as expected and smoke test it. Then when that is confirmed everything's good, I want to branch and configure other environments. So you can build all of that in, and with our advanced capabilities in testing, we understand your design. We understand not just the configuration, but how the system is being used, and we have assets that we can map to the design. So what we would do is answer the question based on the configuration, based on the modules. Here's the coverage you need from our gold library of test cases. We also will present to you all the data permutations. So based on the list of values and the way this system's configured, here's the 20, 30, 40, 50 different ways you could execute a test. You just need to make business decisions. So we better enable you to understand what should be tested, equip you to make quick decisions on how to run those scenarios. And then all of that's on the shelf. So you can run at scale smoke testing before a testing cycle. Before you still need them to manually sign off, they have to adopt the system, but then that just leads to, again, an end-to-end workflow to ensure that delivery consistency, that speed to value, and it's another asset as you look to convert to managed services to help them ongoing once they're live. So we'll cover that more. I think that opens up a whole nother topic. So I would just ask, please come to our next session. We'll communicate that out. We'd love to dive deeper into that.